Hello, my name's Tom, welcome back to my channel where I talk a little bit about theatre, a little bit about being a PhD student, and a little bit about those two things bundled together in some kind of strange, disappointing Christmas present. I very rarely make videos which could be described as in any way topical. Usually I'm either providing my analytical thoughts on a play which perhaps closed about 3 weeks ago, or I'm talking about some academic who died about 30 years ago in order to provide some kind of enjoyable, hopefully, explanation of their theories. Today then is a slight break from that usual programming in order to talk a little bit about the strike action which is currently affecting universities within the UK. So if you aren't a student within the UK at this very moment, then this video will be slightly less relevant to you. However, it might be interesting in terms of looking at why these strikes occasionally happen. So I currently have lots of work related to my teaching for the University of Exeter that I would like to be getting on with. I have some essays that I'd like to be finishing off marking, and I have emails from students asking sensible questions about submissions they're meant to be getting on with, which I would like to be responding to and helping out with. However, I am not doing that today, nor will I be tomorrow, nor for the first 3 days of next week, and then for sporadic days throughout the coming 4 weeks. And the reason for that is that about a month ago, the University and Colleges Union, which represents academic and teaching staff at universities across the United Kingdom, the members of that union were balloted for strike action. Essentially, we were asked whether we would be willing to withhold our labour, to not go into work for a series of about 4 weeks in order to encourage Universities UK, it's going to be lots of letters in this video, to go back to the negotiating table to talk about the redefining of pensions which they're proposing. And the result of that ballot was overwhelmingly, in the vast majority of universities, that lecturers were willing to go on strike. And so over the next 4 weeks, if you are a student at 61 universities within the United Kingdom, then you may see significant disruption to your teaching programme, whether that is a couple of seminars being cancelled or whether it is that you have absolutely no teaching for the next 4 weeks, apart from a few days which are within there where lecturers will be back at work. If this does affect you, I can imagine you might be a little bit annoyed. You've paid a lot of money to go to university, or you've at least had a loan taken out to pay for that you're then going to have to pay back in the future at some point, and you're not getting the services which you have paid for delivered to you. And as I live a little distance away from the university which I teach, and quite an expensive train journey which I can't afford to get down if I'm not going to actually be earning money when I'm there, I've not been able to be at much of the picket line and actions that I'd have liked to have been down at there. So I thought having a tiny little platform on here full of students that I would create a video which kind of explained some of the reason why some of us have decided to go on strike. So essentially what's happened is Universities UK, the body which represents UK universities, has decided to redefine the pensions which have been promised to lecturers within the UK. And to talk in very rough economic terms, there is far better analyses out there which I'd recommend going out to find. It means that lecturers will be due to get about £10,000 less in retirement than they have previously been promised. Now, there was ongoing talks between the UCU, which represents staff, and Universities UK, which represents the universities kind of as corporate organisations, in order to talk about how these pensions might be renegotiated. However, Universities UK has decided to walk away from the table and just make all the decisions themselves. And so that is why this strike action has been called. Essentially, it's a last resort for members of staff at universities to say, look, if you're not going to come back to the negotiating table, then we're going to take some days of strike action to show you and to remind you quite how much you need us. And even as the strike action goes on, if at any point Universities UK, either due to pressure from vice chancellors from universities across the UK, or simply from their own good common sense, decide to come back to the negotiating table, then the remainder of the strike action can still be called off, and we can all go back to work and get back to doing what we love, teaching students and inspiring them with hopefully enjoyable and fun and illuminating creating lectures and seminars about the topics that each of us teach. Now, as I said a second ago, there are far better economic analyses of this dispute out there. I would encourage you to go away and to read lots of sources from all sides of this debate, and to use those critical thinking skills which you've been developing at university to form your own opinion on these. But I primarily wanted to highlight a few things, and that is that for those of us who are on strike, none of this is a particularly easy decision. As I said earlier, I'd quite like to be getting on with finishing some of that marking and replying to students' emails. And the fact that there is such significant strike action going on is not a reflection of the kind of flippancy of lecturers to go on strike, but actually represents quite how significant this current dispute is. As a PhD student, I sit in that weird gulf between being both a student in some senses and also in other senses a member of staff. I have no skin in this game. I do not have one of the USS pensions, which is one of the pensions that are currently being kind of forcibly redefined. And the fact that myself and lots of my other graduate teaching assistant colleagues are going on strike despite not having these pensions reflects kind of the real injustice that we see in this current dispute. Our senior colleagues, lecturers and teaching staff who have been promised a certain security in retirement have been having that taken away, and that's kind of not cool. Also, we don't get paid for any of the days we are on strike, so it is actually costing each individual lecturer significant amounts in the short term to make this broader statement for long-term security. So there are a couple of points to this video. The first is to send out my own solidarity to other striking members of staff out there, but also to pass on some thoughts for students who are potentially annoyed at this strike action about how they can take action to both look for compensation from their own universities and also to hopefully provide support to those members of staff who are striking. I remember back in 2011 when the popular debate was all about the tripling of tuition fees, and on all of the big marches and the big protests due to that, and all of the press releases and the discussions about that, the UCU were always in there on the student side talking about how this was going to have a hugely damaging effect on the diversity of students that were able to financially afford to go to university, and the massive off-putting factor that having to pay £9,000 a year, how that had the potential to really make universities become a really elitist environment once again. In all of those debates, the UCU were in there on student side, and so as a student myself, I would encourage other students to realise that this is a chance to pay some of that massive campaigning force that the UCU has always been in support of students, to repay some of that back in terms of supporting teaching staff. Because if these pension changes go through, there is the chance that lots of university staff who currently populate our British universities will go elsewhere and will go to other countries where they can have that security in retirement, and therefore the quality of teaching will drop drastically. Our lecturers are our universities. Without those teaching staff, then those places of excellent teaching do not exist. So I wanted to end with a few points of action where, if you are a student who would like to support your lecturers while also potentially getting some compensation for the time that you have lost back, some methods through which you can do that. The first thing, if you simply want to show your support to members of staff that are striking, is to simply give them a nice smile and wave if they're out on the picket line outside your university. Just show your support. Just to know that students are on the side of striking staff is really helpful and really heartwarming, and really helps us to realise that the struggle of lecturers is also the struggle of students, and that when one benefits, the other does too. The second is to write to your Vice-Chancellor. Universities UK is dictated to by the Vice-Chancellors of the many universities, and so if we can get Vice-Chancellors to realise that it is massively in their interest in running good, strong, world-competing universities, that they need to get back to that negotiating table to talk about pensions. Writing to Vice-Chancellors then is a really good way of encouraging them to then write to Universities UK to encourage them to get back to the negotiating table on their behalf. the more students that do that can really put pressure on vice-chancellors to do so. Thirdly, do look into ways of trying to get compensation for the hours of lectures that you have missed. This can be incredibly supportive of those who are striking. Currently, the universities themselves are profiting from not delivering the lectures that they have promised to you. Because we don't get paid for any of the time we are not teaching, if you try and get compensation for those missed hours, that can help you because you'll get some of that money potentially taken off your student loan, but also it helps to support your lecturers because it makes the impact of the strike that much more. I know at my own university, University of Exeter, the Student Guild are looking at trying to make some of that case and trying to make that legal argument for getting some of those funds back. But it might be a case of, again, just writing a letter to your Vice-Chancellor to ask for that yourself, or looking to group together with some other students to make that happen. With enough pressure, hopefully what can happen is that you do get the money for the teaching time that you have missed back. And thirdly, is just to make your support for these strikes a little bit more public, to maybe send out a tweet or a Facebook post or something to talk to your other students and tell them why you are supporting this strike action. It's one thing to really privately go, oh, actually I really feel for these members of staff who are being screwed over, but it's another thing just to tell other students that you are supporting that and to really channel that conversation, because I think with a lot of misinformation out there, particularly from the universities themselves, it can be really easy to get the wrong take on this and to think it's in some way lecturers throwing a strop and not going into work, whereas actually there's a really complex and really important debate going on here which has the ability to really affect the future of university education in the United Kingdom. I'll go back to normal programming from next week. I just really wanted to explain some of this dispute to any potential UK students who are being affected by this, and to essentially ask for your support, I suppose, for those lecturers who will be massively affected by these pension changes. Thank you very much for watching, and if you do stick around, if you are a regular viewer, I will see you next week.